For over 3,000 years, there have existed in the Caucasus identifiably Georgian states. But for most of that time, essentially for the first 2,000 years or so, those states tended to be divided between east and west. So in the west, if you go back way back to the 1200s BC, you have the state of Colchis, the area the ancient Greeks considered to be the homeland of King Aedes and the Golden Fleece. If you heard the story of Jason and the Argonauts who seek the Golden Fleece, they were going to Colchis. That's where they were headed. Now, from about the 100s BC on, Colchis began to be dominated by the Romans, and then later the Byzantines and sometimes the Sassanids. It was known as Lazica or Agrisi. Okay, so that's in the west. Meanwhile, in the east of what is today Georgia, you have the kingdom of Kartli, arising around 300 BC. And Kartli was fashioned after the Persian state to the south, the great Persian state, great empire, organized around the ancient Georgian capital of Msketa. And this area was known to the ancient Greeks and the Romans as Iberia, not to be confused with the other Iberia of Spain and Portugal. Well, in the 600s, Arab-led Muslim armies showed up in this region and wreaked havoc. There's quite a bit of devastation as they made their way through the Caucasus and established their rule. And they were actually able to take down both these eastern and western states. Colchis was taken down, Kartli was taken down, and Muslim rule was established over both. By the mid-700s, there's a Muslim emirate right here in Tbilisi, established right here in Tbilisi, loyal to the Umayyads. Well, a few decades later, the Western Kingdom, what had been Colchis or Lazica, broke away from Muslim rule and established the independent Kingdom of Abkhazia. It's very important for modern history, but that's another story. So Abkhazia breaks away in the west. Well, in the next century, due to a revolt here, the emirate here revolts against the Abbasids taking over from the Umayyads. Anyway, there's a revolt in Tbilisi. The Abbasids send an army from Baghdad, and this place is destroyed, obliterated. A few decades later, the old kingdom of Kartli revolts, or at least what had been Kartli revolts. A new kingdom of Kartli emerges, made up of much of the land in the east and especially in the south, in adjoining lands in the south of Abkhazia. So now you have a kingdom of Kartli in the east and Abkhazia in the west, or what had been Colchis. So similar to what had existed before, but a little different. Well, these two royal families intermarry with one another, and it just so happens that the way dynastic succession turns out, the same individual succeeds to both houses at one point in 1008, and that's the year that both royal houses combine, the dynasties combine into one royal house, and a new united kingdom of Georgia emerges for the first time. Well, from Central Asia appeared the next great threat to Georgia in the form of the Seljuks. These are a Turkic people. The Seljuks took over Central Asia, and then by the mid-1000s they've taken over Persia, and they set their sights next on the Byzantine Empire. But in order to take the Byzantine Empire, they're going to have to conquer the southern Caucasus, which they do in brutal and violent fashion, as usual. So the kingdoms of this area, including Georgia, the kingdom of Georgia, are subdued and are forced to pay tribute to the Seljuk Turks. Well, Seljuk victory over a joint Byzantine, Armenian, and Georgian army in 1071. This is an important date in Eurasian history, by the way. The Battle of Manzikert in 1071. This essentially seals the deal for the Byzantine Empire. It marks a more or less permanent withdrawal by the Byzantines from this area, from Anatolia, and unopposed, Turkification of the region. And that really did happen over the next several decades, and certainly next couple centuries. Anatolia goes from being Greek and Greek-speaking to being Turk. Greek speakers are either enslaved, killed, converted, or driven out, and Anatolia really does become Turkey. Anyway, that's all happening to the south. Meanwhile, to the north, the Georgians are having to deal with first the Pechenegs. These are nomadic or semi-nomadic people to the north, in the steppes there north of the Caucasus. And then after 1100, they're dealing with the Cumans, or as the Turks would say, the Kipchaks. These people are constantly at war with each other, it seems, to the Georgians, or they're at war with their neighbors, the Byzantines, Kievan Rus, as well as Georgia. Such is the situation when David IV ascends the throne. Now, David IV was 16 years old in 1089 when he ascended the throne, but he'll become known as David the Builder, as he drives the Seljuks out from one area after another and refuses to pay tribute to them. His victories build upon each other. He rallies the people around him. He earns, in this way, the loyalty of his vassals. And he's smart. At one point, he even invites tens of thousands of Cuman families, the Kipchak families, into his domain to be settled and integrated into Georgian society in return for one horse and one warrior per family to come to his aid when needed. Now, it took many years, but by the 1120s, 1121, you've got the Battle of Didgori, a great Georgian victory over the Seljuks. The next year, you have the taking of Tbilisi from the Seljuks. David had established Georgia as a major regional power, and more importantly, as an independent, sovereign power, wedged between the Seljuks in the south and a shrinking Byzantine Empire in the west, and the Cumans or the Kipchaks in the north, the Black and Caspian Seas, but independent and sovereign. And for several generations, things would remain this way. So he really did kick off a Georgian golden age. This is an era that continues to inspire Georgian nationalists today, almost 1,000 years later. Conquest was coupled with diplomacy and strategic marriage alliances. See, the Georgian royal family married into the royal families of the Alan kingdom to the north, of Kievan Rus, of the Byzantine Empire, even of the Seljuks of Rum. See, the Seljuk Empire broke up into several smaller Seljuk states, one of them being the Seljuks of Rum. And the Georgian royal family married into its royal family. So these very strategic alliances, of course, that's how it went when you were a royal back in the day. Under David's successors, the next couple successors, Georgia continued to do well, continued to expand its borders, very prosperous, but it was under Tamar, Queen Tamar, that the kingdom of Georgia experienced the pinnacle of its power and prestige. Queen Tamar was the first female monarch in Georgian history. She was very tough, and she had to be. She had to survive attempts to take her down both from without and from within. Her own husband tried to take her down. He failed. The Seljuks tried to take her down. They invaded many times. They were repelled each time. Under Tamar, Georgia controlled area that today can be found in Georgia, in Azerbaijan, in Armenia, northeastern Turkey, northwestern Iran, in Russia. And this was a sizable area, particularly for a Caucasus state. Later, Queen Tamar will be made a saint within the Georgian Orthodox Church. Freed from foreign domination, Georgian culture experienced a sort of renaissance during this period. It was during this time that many beautiful monasteries were erected, many of which survive to this day. They're amazing. Georgian art, metalwork, painting thrived during this period. Georgian literature thrived during this period, both religious and secular. In fact, it was during this time that Rustaveli composed the most iconic work of Georgian literature ever, The Knight in the Panther's Skin, which was actually an allegory in praise of Queen Tamar and her rule. Georgia's cultural, military, and political dominance in the Caucasus region continued into the reign of Tamar's son, George IV, until a new invader people showed up. These guys, possibly more brutal than any who had come before, and I'm speaking of the Mongols. Now, the Mongols, apart from their apparent desire to conquer the world, were in the Caucasus for a very specific reason. That is, they were pursuing the one-time leader of the Khwarezmian Empire. The Khwarezmian Empire, this is the empire whose slight against the Mongols had dragged the Mongols into Central Asia, kickstarting their world conquest in the first place. While he and the remnants of his forces had ravaged his way through the Caucasus before. And now the Mongols are here, searching for him. He would die in obscurity later, but the point is, the Caucasus became the target of both Khwarezmian and Mongol aggression. So they found themselves caught in the middle of this death feud between the two groups. Well, the Mongols killed any who refused to submit, as always, and the Khwarezmians specifically targeted Christians, which meant they killed a lot of people as they ravaged their way through Armenia and Georgia, looted a lot of churches as well. And this back and forth continued until finally, of course, the Mongols came out on top, and Georgia found itself in the 1230s and 1240s
a tribute-paying vassal of the Mongol Empire. And this effectively ends the Georgian Golden Age. Now, the Mongol Empire, the big one, of course, it's going to break up. And, to the north of the Caucasus, you'll have the Golden Horde, the Mongol Golden Horde. And to the south of the Caucasus, you'll have the Mongol Ilkhanate. And unfortunately for Georgia, once again, it will find itself on the crossroads as these two, the Golden Horde and the Ilkhanate, duke it out with one another here, further ravaging the area as they struggle for control of this crossroads. In all the chaos, Georgia was actually able to break free temporarily, and it even looked like for a while that a new Georgian Renaissance might be breaking out. But it wasn't to be. Another Turco-Mongol subjugator, a would-be Genghis Khan named Timur the Lame, or Tamerlane, rose up in the east, conquered his way through Persia and into the Caucasus by the 1380s. Once again, Georgia found itself caught between two battling empires, the Golden Horde still to the north, and now Timur's vast empire in the south. And Timur invaded many, many times, slave raiding and conquering in the Caucasus, and outdoing even the Mongols in his brutality. Now, after Timur died, his empire crumbled, as did Timurid control of Georgia. But any hope of a renewed golden age was dead too. By the 1400s, Georgia was politically fragmented anyway, clearing the way for foreign domination for centuries afterwards. Safavid Persians will rule here, the Ottoman Turks, the Russian Empire. Still, the Georgian Golden Age left a powerful impression on the Georgian people, providing the bedrock for the emergence of a modern nation.